Good morning, everyone. My name is Wibke Meyer. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs at CropLife International, and I have the pleasure to speak today about the future outlook for MRLs and the impact of European Union policy on maximum residue limits in South Africa. I'm joining you virtually. I hope that in the future there will be the possibility that I can join you in person again, but I hope we have a good interaction today. To quickly introduce CropLife International, we are the global federation representing the plant protection and the plant science industry. We are made up of 6 member companies that research, manufacture, and sell crop protection and plant biotechnology products. The organization also serves as a global network of regional and national associations, and we span more than 90 countries. We are the global network and the voice of leading advocates of the plant protection industry. We champion the roles of agricultural innovations in crop protection and plant biotechnology to support and advance sustainable agriculture. But today I will talk about European Union policy, especially about the Green Deal and the MRL policy. So the European Green Deal is a set of policy initiatives by the European Commission with the overarching aim to transforming the European Union's economy for a sustainable future. There are a number of key initiatives that you can see here illustrated, and there are some that are more important for agriculture, such as the Farm to Fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and the chemical strategy for sustainability. Today, I will focus on specific elements of the Farm to Fork strategy, namely the MRL setting procedures. But in general, the objectives of the Farm to Fork strategy are to reduce the environmental and climate footprint of the European Union's food system, to strengthen its resilience, and to ensure food security. The European Commission also wants to lead a global transition towards competitive, sustainable farm to fork, and they want to tap on new opportunities. The European Union stated that they will pursue the development of green alliances on sustainable food systems. They will include sustainability chapters in all European Union bilateral trade agreements, and they want to promote their farm to fork objectives in international standards and in the relevant international bodies. So therefore, the European Farm to Fork initiative clearly has implications for trading partners and for every country actually that trades with Europe or is participating in international bodies. We all agree that food systems need to be more sustainable, but how to get there, I think that requires a lot of discussion. The European Union has put with its Farm to Fork policy its proposal forward, but in our view, there is not one size that fits all. Different regions have different needs, and we need a debate on how we become more sustainable in our food systems internationally and not only in the European Union. Therefore, we need a holistic view of potential negative and unintended trade-offs globally. And we also need to make sure that food security is a global policy priority, which is non-negotiable. Therefore, we are trying to foster dialogue between the European Union and its trading partners and trying to help the European Union moving away from unilaterally imposing trade barriers. We want to illustrate this at one of the key initiatives that the European Union has launched. When they announced their Farm to Fork policies, they clearly stated in their communication that going forward, they want to take into account environmental aspects when setting import tolerances for pesticides that are no longer approved in the European Union. It was not clear for almost 2 years how they would implement that, because they also stated that they want to be compliant with World Trade Organization legislation and procedures. But before I explain what the European Union has now is in process of implementing, I first would like to put us all on the same page of what is an MRL. What are the purpose of MRLs? Maximum residue limits are the concentration of pesticides residues that are legally permitted in or on food commodities and animal feed. The MRLs are based on good agricultural practice data. That means they are based on the registered uses in the countries, and that is what is mentioned on the pesticide labels. MRLs are therefore for checking whether the crop protection product has been used according to the label instructions in the respective countries. Because pesticides are used differently in different countries, because there are different crops, there's different pest pressure, different farming practices, MRLs can vary between different countries. And therefore, because they are used to check whether a pesticide has been applied correctly, if you want to trade your food, then you need to make sure that you register your MRL level also in the country with which you want to trade. And that is then called an import tolerance. So an import tolerance is the maximum residue level that is set on the uses registered in a foreign country in order to allow the import of treated commodities from abroad and to facilitate international trade. So MRLs have several functions. In international trade, they ensure that the food is safe for consumption and therefore can be imported into a country. And it's also an easy tool to check if the pesticide was used correctly, and therefore if the product can be placed on the market. Primarily, the MRL are trading standards. And now, but with the European Union now stating that they want to also consider environmental factors when setting MRLs, that is moving away from internationally agreed principles. As I mentioned before, MRLs are set to facilitate trade and to protect the consumer health. Environmental aspects are considered in the registration of the pesticide when they are registered for use in the country where they are used. They are analyzed by the competent authority that knows the farming practices in the country, that knows the needs, the pest pressure, and that knows also the environmental conditions where the pesticide is used. Moreover, MRLs are not an appropriate tool to address global environmental concerns because the level of residues on a harvested crop does not correlate to the safety for non-target species or the local environment. Now the European Union, they are testing now their new procedure, and they have setting the precedent. Over the summer, they have announced to their trading partners via the World Trade Organization, the Technical Barriers to Trade Committee, that they want to lower the MRLs for 2 neonicotinoid substances to the limit of quantification. They have cited concerns on global population of pollinators, and they hope that with the lowering of MRLs that they will protect global population of pollinators. The process started in June 2020, and the consultation with World Trade Organization members ended in early September 2022. If the regulation is implemented, what we are expecting, then the entry into force is probably in the first quarter of 2023, and the lowered MRLs would apply from 3 years after the entry into force in early 2026. The European Commission has already said that they are now doing this for these 2 substances, but they have already communicated other substances that will follow a similar approach. So in the Farm to Fork strategy, they announced that they want to lower MRLs and consider environmental factors for substances that are no longer approved in the European Union. Trading partners have responded in the WTO process, and 19 countries raised concerns. On top, this topic is discussed heavily in the relevant committees in the World Trade Organization, namely the Technical Barriers to Trade Committee, and in the SPS, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Committee, and also in other agricultural committees. So many countries have raised concerns, particularly also South Africa, who has alluded to unique sustainability objectives and challenges, and that South Africa has high pest and disease pressure due to a combination of heat, humidity, and moisture from different weeds, pests, and fungi, and that they need to address those by using the tools that they have available and use diverse methods, tools, and technologies in order to farm sustainably and to meet a growing demand for food and feed in a world of climate change. They also raised that the measure may restrict trade to the European Union for their agricultural products and will disrupt production and negatively impact livelihoods in South Africa, particularly for small and rural producers. They also ask for science and risk-based decision-making driven by the available data to enhance sustainability in agriculture. Many other countries responded similarly and also alluded to that this way forward, the unilateral approach from the European Union to lower MRLs, is not in line with WTO procedures. So this discussion is ongoing, but we still believe that the European Union will move ahead. So what do we as industry say about that? So we advocate and strongly stress every time we have the chance to speak that maximum residue limits for pesticides are a trading standard that ensure that are driven by good agricultural practice and that ensure that the food that is traded is safe for consumption. It allows for a level playing field for all farmers, not only in the European Union, but globally. MRLs are not an appropriate tool to tackle environmental challenges globally, because as I mentioned before, MRLs are not, the level of residue on harvested crops does not correlate with the exposure to or the risk to non-target organisms or the environment. It is important that trade is enabled between the European Union and its global trading partners in order to meet sustainability and food security needs globally. We also want to challenge that the European Union is moving away from international agreed trade principles and rules and is implementing de facto non-tariff trade barriers. We also encourage the European Union and all its trading partners to address and discuss global environmental concerns at multilateral fora. So that is what we are proposing and what we are advocating for. I want to highlight again with the notification of these two substances, it is just setting the precedents. So even if farmers or countries are not impacted too much with the lowering of the MRLs for these two substances, other substances will follow. So this means that de facto, on the long run, farmers in South Africa may lose tools in their toolbox based on policy that is developed outside of South Africa, namely in the European Union. And that there is a risk that the European Union on the long run will drive what is globally registerable for pesticides and uses in other countries. Also, the European Union approach makes everything less predictable because they go on a case-by-case basis. And we need predictability for the farmers and for the traders in order to allow trade of agricultural commodities. With that, I hope that I haven't bothered you with too much details and that you enjoyed this. But I want to come back to one of my previous slides. As I mentioned before, there's no one size that fits all. We all want to have more sustainable food systems, but different regions have different needs and need different tools in their toolbox to farm sustainable. We also need predictability. And we have the competent authorities around the world that can evaluate the tools that are needed to farm sustainably in their jurisdictions. So I would like to encourage you, if you have the opportunity to speak to stakeholders in the European Union and elsewhere, please explain how farming in South Africa works and how farming is sustainable in South Africa, how the tools are registered, that pollinator risk has been assessed, and that pollinator risk can be managed in South Africa, and that those substances can be safely used in South Africa. But if you want to learn more about MRLs, there is a training module released soon that we have developed within CropLife International with all food safety and MRL and trade experts. It consists of 7 modules, 7 quizzes, and frequently asked questions document. If you do those modules online, it's an online training, it's free of charge. And if you complete it, you can also download a certificate of completion. So if you want to dive into the topic of MRLs deeper, please stay tuned and we can send you the link soon. I thank you for your attention and I'm ready to take your questions.